Hello.
So, Graham, it's well, a Sunday night reflecting on hot weather today, which puts me in mind of somewhere that I've never been to, and can't remember whether you've been to India or not, but you can remind me and embarrass me
I
by
have.
saying yes. I thought you had.
Yeah, only in the sense that I stopped on the way to Hong Kong once. It was in what was then called Bombay. I was in Bombay Airport for about 4 hours. That's
I think
my huge experience of
that's
India.
about as much as
Yeah,
Elvis Presley was at a Scottish airport and never actually set foot on land in Britain.
exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
but anyway, tonight you're an expert, and that's good.
Well, I'm not.
And the,
I mean, you know, as they say, like a little knowledge is dangerous. So
a little knowledge is dangerous, but we're going to see how that works out in
we're
our
about to
first
step into
discussion.
dangerous waters, for sure.
So this is a book called What Incarnations? I think is that right?
No,
Is that right? What
it's called
Incarnations?
it's called Incarnations: A
Oh,
History of
so sorry.
India in a History of India in 50 Lives.
Ah, yes, by
Mm,
Sunil Khilnani. And
that's
what you're
right.
saying is 50 lives that are chosen, and what it says about India and Britain. In those 50 lives, uh, what's the time span of of those 50 lives, Graham?
Well, you're talking like about 500 years before the birth of Christ to almost the current day. So it's an amazing potted history
Gosh, yes.
of India. And you got to remember, India didn't actually exist until the British defined it as
Well,
India. It was a
yeah,
set of princely states and various other
yeah.
communities, which is heavily influenced in large parts by Persia at the time. So, to do a history like that is amazing. But this is not a normal bloke. I mean, he's professor of the India Institute at King's College in London.
Mm.
And on the book itself, it's described as an entertaining and provocative account of India's past, written by one of the country's leading thinkers. So he's a highly acclaimed bloke. He's not like your average writer. And it's
No.
just an absolutely fascinating book, and it's so brilliantly written. It's easy to read, and you learn so much without ever it being taxing or a chore. It makes history a joy to read.
Which it should be.
Exactly, yeah.
Arguably, well, it is. The lessons that should be most learned are those of history. And we know that that isn't the case, but in principle, it should be, which is why literature is a form of history that's as we might want history to be or change things, but history is history, and therefore it's ultimately perhaps the subject that says more about man than any other. Um, and when you get a book
Yeah, but
like this,
it's the most contested because whose
yeah, well,
history, who writes the history,
well,
which books do you pick on,
exactly.
what's your bias in the first place? So it's all,
Well,
it's quite a
even that
complicated
name,
subject.
isn't it? People say it's his story, not her story. So even that,
Hmm.
right
That's
at the
true. That's
start
true.
of that word. But there's an interesting point straight away, Graham. In a history of India, what it says about India and Britain, are all the 50 lives within that history of India Indian lives, or are there some British lives from the time that of
No,
the colonial rule in India?
there's a couple of British ones, but only to serve the story, and
Right.
only British people who weren't thoroughly imperialist. You're not going to get chapters on the who set up the East India Company. It's not
No.
that sort of book.
No.
It's written by an Indian for Indians, and it was published by Penguin in 2016. I think it was originally the professor was originally on a BBC Four radio series, and it's been
Ah.
turned to book. And
Mm.
it's very it reads very well because it sounds like it was spoken originally, which I think it was. But yeah, it's not it's this chap Sunil Khilnani has his own take on India and modern India, and although he's obviously done massive research and knows his stuff, and is completely balanced and totally fair and very perceptive throughout, you can tell that what he doesn't like is an idea of India as only being one country with one religion and one
Mm.
political party. He's not that sort of person. He likes to see India in the round and all its complexity.
That's a good word for India, complexity, isn't it?
Well, the amazing thing you learn, and I did do Southeast Asian history at University of Edinburgh a long time ago,
Ah,
which again does not make me an expert, but I did study it for a year.
yeah.
Uh, the interesting thing is that it's so divided, India. It was so divided, and still sort of is. And
Mm,
it's partly because it was a continent, not a country. But even within the continent, there's so much division based on religion and the caste system. But then because you've also got regional differences, even the same religions and the technically same caste system have differences in how they're applied from state to state and region to region. So it's hellishly complicated. But you come away from the book really admiring the country because all the figures that the book focuses on, there's so much creativity, so much deep thinking,
mm,
and so much hard work, usually to try and undo the rigidities of the caste system and religion and to throw the British out. And there was so many people trying that for 100 years or so before it became
exactly.
successful, maybe
Mm,
more. So it's all very admirable figures and obviously quite famous figures that even people who know nothing about India have heard of, like
mm,
Gandhi and Jinnah and Raj Kapoor and the Buddha
mm.
himself, or was it herself? I think it was a himself. It was a historical figure.
Yes, one is entering dangerous territory, of course, these days, in attributing any um, sex to and gender to that. But I think Buddha, as I understood it, male. Uh,
Yeah.
so your question that you're looking at here is what it says about India, but also what it says about Britain, which, if you look at the long history that's being covered in this book, it's Britain's part in India is, you can't call it a small part. I mean, obviously it's a significant part, but it is only a part.
Well, as usual, the British, it's all about divide and rule.
Yeah,
So the way they ran India was for Britain's interests,
yeah,
usually economic,
yeah.
but they would play on the different regional and religious differences to make sure that they had everybody on board in India
Mm.
supporting them, because the British never had a huge military presence in India.
No.
It relied on the system operated with Indians, so the civil service, the Indian civil service that is, under the Raj, was mostly Indian people. They weren't allowed to get to the very top, obviously, but there weren't that many British in the Indian civil service. And if you did serve the crown in India, you were then given Western education. But if you weren't serving the crown, if you weren't working for the crown in the Raj, you you got no education whatsoever. Not at all. The British would also do things like if they fancied a prince's land, because they always said that they ruled with consent. If they fancied taking over a prince's land, they would like exploit some weakness in the prince's running of his own state in India, and then turf him out, saying that he'd been incompetent or corrupt. And they did that quite a lot.
Mm.
But then if you went along with that, there's a famous case of a 19th century prince of Punjab who was booted out of his role by the British in the 19th century. But because he didn't complain, they brought him to Britain to live and gave him a really luxurious stipend and treated him like royalty. And he was paraded around and he hobnobbed with Queen Victoria and he had a really great life
Mm.
until he started to support people back in India who wanted the Punjab to be liberated from the British. And then the British hospitality, the tap was turned off. So the British were very there was no one British approach. They did whatever worked for Britain. And you would have thought, isn't that nice to let this prince from the Punjab live a nice life in Britain and be treated like an important person in Britain? But if you think about it, what's more dispiriting to people in India who don't want the British to rule them than seeing one of their own princes hobnobbing with the good and great of Britain? So again, it worked in the British favour to demoralise people back in India who were thinking about agitating towards independence.
It, I mean, we're in a time now where we're uneasy about imperialism, colonialism, what we did, whether it was entirely wrong whether there was any good in it at all. And that's going to be a discussion that is going to continue and probably continue to be awkward for quite some time. Does the book address that situation as to whether now the British relationship with India is a topic that's seen within the book at all, and whether it's a healthier relationship now, given the scope and scale of India now, the world's biggest population, bigger even than China? Does the book at all address how the relationship has changed?
I think Britain and the West is more obsessed with their imperial past than countries abroad are. I know countries abroad will occasionally want their artifacts back, or occasionally ask for compensation, but that's about the here and now. They'd like to have those important cultural artifacts back in their own country, which is something not to get back at the British or the Americans, the French, or whoever. It's because it'd be nice to have them, and compensation is always good. So I think we're more obsessed with that than they are, and I don't think Sunil Khilnani is particularly obsessed with it either, because
no,
India has moved on. India
yes
is a really important world power, and doesn't need to forever look back to the Raj and imperialism.
No, it's an expanding world power with the potential for even more expansion.
It's almost like we can't let go. They've moved on, and we haven't.
Well, we're rewriting our history, aren't we?
Well, this is a fight between us. It's a internal division in the West and in Britain in particular about our imperial historical past.
It's
not really. Once again, it's not really about India.
Is that futile ultimately? Should we just try to strive for better relations? For relations for now.
Well, you should try and have a good life now and try and do the right thing now. It's a bit late to undo, 300 years history.
I'm entirely with you on that, Graham. It's King Charles feeling the need, and I say that that's not good terms for it, but wanting to redress the balance, shall we say, address the issue of colonialism, and even his family's role in that. And it maybe it's our internal problem to deal with it. It's along with the issues of Brexit, all that thing of defining who we are.
I can't
maybe a book like this, which is celebrating something stronger, greater, longer lasting, 50 great lives in India over a long time, and we might just fret over our contribution for a short time to India. And actually, the balance of this book clearly showing this is a huge and mighty nation, as you say, wasn't even called India at the start, a complex one, but that is one of the great powers of the world now.
Well, when we write the history of Britain, we don't go on about how terrible it was that the French, i.e. the Norman Conquest, took over England, in 1066, wherever the hell it was. That's not really an issue. It's like, we don't demand things from the French for how they behaved, 1,000 years ago. So this is not to defend the past. This is to say the past is in fact the past, and you should treat other countries with respect. Because you should learn from the past. Respect, not because you're feeling guilty about something. You should do the right thing.
I think the guilt thing is destructive, self-destructive, and although obviously issues like Windrush need sorting and settling. But
that's the present. That's not the past. That's a present policy.
Correct.
Dealing with living people.
And that's the difference, isn't it? It's dealing with now and relationships now, and how that should be, and making a better world of that than we are currently, and improving what we're doing with that. So if we could beat ourselves up endlessly about the past, I actually think it'd be far better to be beating ourselves up about the present, which it's an ongoing debate, the debate on immigration. And but yesterday I was at a memorial service for Paul Burbridge, Riding Lights theatre company, Christian theatre company in York, which he ran for more than 40 years. And Bernadette, his wife, now his widow, said that one of the great things that in the latter years of Paul's work in theatre, which often looked at issues ahead of the time. But within that, he became a pacifist, although, as she put it, you can't imagine him being a pacifist. He would have been an activist pacifist. But
He would have been
wanting,
aggressive pacifist.
I don't think he would have been that, but he would have been passionate
Okay.
in trying to make pacifism work. And that pacifism, by which I mean trying to find common ground for the benefit of all, would surely be a better world and a better policy. And that would serve this nation far, far better than what seems to thrive in this nation now, which is division.
I agree entirely, Charles.
So that's a bit of a heavy subject for us, our first one. Shall we go for something flippant? And well, I'm not saying that it's flippant to suggest, your stint as a master of ceremonies and a DJ, which I mean, this is not the first time you've done these duties, but this is, I misread it as at the BedFest. Then I thought, no, the
I like
BedFest.
BedFest. It's a good name.
The all-day music event. Of course, in the baking sun of Knaresborough yesterday. And more to the point, why you were wearing a wig, which of course we remember your previous wig wearing, Graham, I think it was at Wilma's 50th, wasn't it? I think we had a wig that day.
50th what? But yeah, let's move on. let's move on from that one. Yeah, well, BedFest is like the annual live music event at Henshaw's Arts and Crafts Centre in Knaresborough, which always accompanies Knaresborough Bed Race. And Knaresborough Bed Race, as you know, is one of the craziest community events in Britain, along with cheese rolling. Although it's more enjoyable.
Although apparently that's been interrupted, and the cheese rolling has been banned, hasn't it, this year?
Well, people get injured. That's one.
Well, that's what they're saying. Apparently, apparently they've decided all of a sudden that cheese is dangerous, which is news to me. But there we go. They've been rolling for I don't know how many centuries of doing this, but no, it's health and safety. No. But anyway.
But yeah, cheese rolling does sound mad. But whereas Knaresborough Bed Race, you get 90 teams who push a bed up and down the hills of the small town of Knaresborough. I think it's a distance of 2 miles or so. But there's like 6 of you, and there's somebody on the bed.
And they cross the river, don't they?
Cross the River Nade through the water with the bed and the team. Yeah. It's a really spectacular thing to watch, but it's also very grueling for the participants. 30,000 people turn up.
Is that right?
In a small town to watch it. It's that popular. It's in the street. Yeah. The streets are thronged everywhere. And although there are police and it's well organised by the Knaresborough Lions to raise money for charity, there's a certain anarchic spirit about it, which isn't really allowed in Britain much these days. No. So it's a really, really brilliant event. And BedFest has been going for 10 years, so it was the 10th anniversary. So the original organiser, Rufus Beckett, who's also one half of the Paperweights acoustic duo that you know from gigs around Harrogate. Well, he said, well, Graham, you introduced the first one. You should do this one. And I thought, yeah, I suppose he's right. Yeah, so I usually do a DJ set, but usually in a side stage in the cafe. I don't usually get to be in the main stage.
No.
So I thought, good grief, I'm going to be opening this thing, and I'm going to be in the main stage. And I'm not really a DJ. No matter how many times I do it, I'm not a DJ. I have no technical knowledge. I don't mix things properly. I can barely put the tracks on. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to get some Dutch courage by wearing a wig, by doing something really stupid. So I got this wig from a wig shop, which I thought made me look a bit like James Fox in the film Performance.
Oh yeah, that's a good look to get.
Yeah, it didn't work. I really didn't look like James Fox, and also who was going to get the reference? So I thought I'll just bung on my 1997 bucket hat, my green corduroy Quicksilver bucket hat, which made me look a bit like something like was it Smash and Nicey?
You know
that sort of like Radio One DJ thing. Yeah. Or was it Kevin? Kevin, what's his face? That terrible comedy.
Oh yeah, it could be Kevin and Perry. Were they called?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so I ended up looking like that, which is great because I wanted to look stupid anyway. And so it actually went way better than I thought it was going to go. And my strange choice of music went down pretty well. And at one point I said, little did I know when I introduced this event 10 years ago that in 10 years' time I would be standing here now looking back at me introducing the show 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Which sort of bamboozled the audience. So maybe that wasn't a good line.
So, I mean, at BedFest in terms of obviously live acts that take part, any familiar names? Just thinking, any names
Well,
connected with beds at all?
it's now that the Harrogate live music scene is disintegrated, in the sense there's only one real live venue, Blues Bar, which is tiny.
Yeah,
I mean,
which we've
I'm talking
discussed
about
in
for
the
local
past, haven't we?
bands or
Yeah.
indie bands, and the Den. And the Roosters Brewery at Hornby Park puts on some live acts, but there's nowhere regular and there's nowhere sizable to put on visiting
No.
acts. All you've got is Harrogate Theatre, the Royal Hall, Harrogate Convention Centre,
Mm,
which aren't big enough to get the big names, but also are too big for local bands to play. So
yeah.
Bedfest is one of the few occasions where there's a proper showcase and a really nice venue with lots of people watching for local talent. And Harrogate's still got a lot of singer-songwriters, a lot of different sort of rock bands and reggae bands, and also some good DJs. So DJ Trev followed me, and he's a proper professional DJ from Harrogate who's done so much for Harrogate music scene over the last 20 years and more. And then you had DJ Rory Hoy. And Rory Hoy is phenomenal, phenomenal. If he'd been around in 1995, he would
Mm.
have been maybe about as big as Fatboy Slim, who he does know and who he actually sounds a bit like because he's really into big beat. And he was fantastic. And there was Lens the rapper,
He did York
who's
Pride the week
evolving into a
before,
terrific
Graham, as
rapper.
well.
Who's what?
He York Pride up at
Oh, yeah.
Knaresborough. He DJ'd at the York Pride Day last weekend.
And he's also written a new book about the Beatles. So he's
Yeah.
quite a productive man.
Yeah.
And then you had Hellfire Jack, the absolutely mental.
Oh yes.
They're sort of like royal. I talked to Alex, the lead singer, and he said afterwards, I said, like, you're like Royal Blood, but better.
Yeah, they wouldn't be. They wouldn't be going. This is rock music. They wouldn't be having to tell people what it was.
Well,
So,
Hellfire
Graham,
Jack wouldn't care about the audience; just
no,
plow ahead anyway.
I mean, this is the bed race is. I like that thought that it's anarchic. It is Bedfest as well, kind of anarchic in spirit. And as you, as
No,
master of
because
ceremonies, were you anarchic in spirit?
well, I tried to throw a little bit of that sort of stuff in, but has got out of fashion. And
Mm,
Henshaw's is Arts and Crafts Centre is
yeah,
owned by the Henshaw's charity, which does so much to help people
it
with
does.
sight loss and other
It's a
disabilities to go
wonderful,
beyond
wonderful charity, as we
expectations.
know. Yes.
So you're honor bound not to misbehave too much because
No.
it's their premises and it's for a good cause. So yeah, you can be anarchic, but within a certain boundary. Henshaws, you don't want to ruin the event by getting carried
No.
away.
No.
So I didn't get carried away. I didn't ruin the
Oh
event,
well. Yeah.
and they listened to my combination music, which ended with Fontaine's DC followed by Rod Stewart
Ah, which Rod Stewart?
sailing.
That's a cheesy number.
Well, yeah, you should always go for something cool to something cheesy.
That's a good bit of advice. But that would also apply to rolling cheeses in Gloucestershire, wouldn't it? In Tetbury, I think it used to be. Yeah. So Graham, I went to see Steve Earle this week. Steve Earle, best known for performing with the Dukes, started as a country singer, young age really. That started as a country singer. Texas is part of his life. Lived now in New York for 19 and a half years. And he's going to be playing Glastonbury and he's going to be playing Black Deer Festival as well as doing independent dates. And what Steve decided to do was just to play solo, just him.
Oh
And
yeah.
much like Ryan Adams, who I reviewed on our podcast a few weeks back. And without drawing comparisons with Ryan Adams, I guess on the songwriting stock, again, it's one of those ones where you think, oh, actually, there's a whole lot of great songs by Steve Earle, and with Ryan Adams, you think, of course he wrote that. Oh yeah, of course he wrote that. And with Steve Earle, it's not. I think with Ryan Adams, maybe Ryan Adams would feel he should have been more successful. I think with Steve Earle, he's driven as much by the need for political change, which he's had to put it mildly, a colourful life. 7 marriages, I think. Married
7.
twice to, yeah, I think 7. Married twice to the same woman amongst that list of 7. I think that's correct.
Good grief, that's incredible.
Yeah, and he's served time as well. And he talked about the fact he was a recovering heroin addict, and so the way that the gig worked. There was a support act, Roseanne Reed, who has had just had a 10-month-old baby she has, and who was her great contribution was to the little boy had pulled the strings from the three bottom strings from her guitar, and not actually for the gig, but it hadn't quite sounded right. She felt ever since, but so she did her set, and then Steve came on, and he opened up with, I was thinking, I know this song, I know this song, I know this song, and it was "If I Should Fall from Grace" by the Pogues.
Not by him.
But and so he did this, and I'm going, I reckon, and at the end he said, I did this song. He said Shane MacGowan is one of the greatest of songwriters. He said, but I'd have to do this song because you can never hear what the hell he's singing about. So I'm by singing it, I'm showing you actually what that song is about. So that was his kind of just a kind of off kilter opening before running through any number of hits. I mean, I suppose people know Galway Girl, they know well. He'd done a version of My Old Friend the Blues, which of course Proclaimers did a wonderful version of that. But his strongest songwriting is rooted in writing about political issues in America and wider than that. And that's become even more prominent. He's 68 now. He did some songs that he called chick songs as part of the set, which is essentially songs of love and relationships. But actually the real key to the show, it seemed to me, was when he got onto the issues that trouble him in America and wider than that as well. And he's a novelist as well as being a musician. He's also contributed to a musical in which he wrote the music for this musical. That is rooted in the story of the worst mining explosion in America since the 1970s. And I thought that was one of the most powerful moments of the night. So he did a song from that album, and at the end of the song, because he performed every night in the musical, the names of all those who died, he sang it as part of the song at the end. And it was absolutely moving that he did that. He then moved on to the most difficult subject for him, which his son, Justin Townes Earle, songwriter in his own right, he said, I'm now going to have to address a subject I never ever thought I would ever have to talk about. He said, the loss of my firstborn. And he said, I'm not alone in this. He said, you know, there are many stories of parents outliving their children. And he's done an album of Justin's songs. And the thing that I think, there's anger as much as anything, sadness, of course, to have lost a son, huge sadness. And the anger came from the fact that Justin had fentanyl was mixed in with cocaine, and it seems to be the fentanyl that killed him that night. I think the way Steve described it, he said one bump and that was it, and said there were 3 lines of cocaine that were not even had that night. And I suppose a mixture of anger as part of that. I mean,
So did he lose his son partly because of his own lifestyle?
So that's,
did he pass on his sins to his
you
son?
ask a question that there's the journalist in you, because, and rightly so, Graham, because he did talk about life and how, you know, as a recovering heroin addict, he didn't do that. He didn't conflate that with the story of the death of Justin. But he obviously is aware of his own situation, of the life that he's lived. As I say, to put it mildly, the colourful life that he's lived. But he's not alone in rock and roll in doing that. And many a story, of course, of the offspring of a somewhat reckless life led by the parent. That rock and roll is steeped in that story. But of course, Justin was a hugely talented songwriter in his own right. And there's only so much you can do as a parent in steering a course through life, you know. So I don't think he didn't address that issue of, you know, that side of it, but just that obviously any disposition that he has on anything, you know, the way he is, recovering heroin addict, he has been to hell and back in his life. Why
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like a fun gig though, Charles.
So he is a hugely witty man as well.
Ah.
I haven't perhaps got that across in what I'm describing, but he is witty, and we know
Yeah,
this. We know this from the way that I mean, the best gigs for me always involve really good talking to the audience. Costello doing that, I've always mentioned him. Billy Bragg doing that. Leonard Cohen, that concert in Leeds, absolutely exquisite way that he spoke with the audience, beautifully done.
yeah, he had a voice like gravy, or
He did. In
just
Steve's case,
gorgeous.
he's got
Gorgeous.
this gravel in his voice, and in fact,
Mm.
sometimes when he's singing, there's a that actually goes through in between the lines. He suddenly
Yeah.
before the next line, there's a in his voice because there's so much tarmac going into his voice.
Uh-huh.
But he is a really good storyteller. But it is done with a political zeal and passion. And
Yeah,
it's
I
one
was
of
good.
those situations where you kind of wish, why can't more Americans think like Steve Earle? Why not? Why can't
That is
America think like
yeah,
Steve
well,
Earle?
they do, yeah, but a lot of them do. They just don't tour Britain singing songs that are worth paying money for. No, I think there's a lot of things like Steve Earle's. America's not like a single country, as you well know.
No, I mean,
I was, yeah,
maybe I'm being simplistic, right? Maybe I'm being simplistic.
I think yeah, but I was going to ask two questions about the gig,
Yeah,
and you got to bear in mind that I know nothing. Well, no, I know nothing about it, but I'm very far from an expert. I mean,
yeah.
I know that Earl's a singer. Oh, wait a minute, that's Elkie Brooks' song. That's Elkie Brooks.
That was
How's a
okay. I
singer?
thought it was a little
Yeah.
contrived. I didn't see it coming. Then it hit me in the face like a kipper.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Anyway,
terrible
the
gag.
more serious
Terrible. Anyway,
question
I was gonna say, like,
you're going to ask.
first of all, is he like the American Billy Bragg, really? Is he that sort of figure? Because you always trust Billy Bragg to tell you the
I
truth
I think
and to be in the right side.
that's a really good call. I think
Mm.
you could absolutely make that comparison. And maybe I think Steve Earle should have been perhaps more successful than he has been. I think for a while he was actually outwriting Springsteen for a while. Springsteen, obviously, up there with the gods. But there was a phase I felt where Steve Earle genuinely was outwriting him. But he
Yeah,
hasn't obviously had that same level of success that
yeah, but
Springsteen's
that's
had.
because Springsteen himself has kept on changing and has
Yeah,
done things consciously to be successful.
Steve Earle has done that.
Springsteen didn't become huge by accident. He
No,
wanted to be huge. His manager wanted to be huge, and his
yeah,
music and persona and hairstyle all changed when it
yeah,
suited his ambitions, which I'm not knocking for because
no.
that's showbiz, and Springsteen's brilliant. So
Yeah,
fair enough.
I think
But my
Steve Earle
yeah,
would prefer to be seen as the outsider making sense of this world. Within that,
yeah,
though, I mean, started as a country musician, but he's taken in folk. He worked with Del McCoury. Obviously, the Dukes we know. Country rock comes within it. Blues comes within his music. He has always moved and within flexibility, within a template that's familiar to suit the voice.
yeah. Well, that's my
I
second question. But my
go
second
on.
question
Yes.
is he actually a country act?
So, in the best tradition of country acts, he is very detailed in his lyrics. There's one song that's a song about Billy Austin, who was served the death penalty, and it's told from Billy's perspective. So that would be very much in the tradition of country music. So there's the storytelling, songwriting, and with melody as important as riff. And so
But can you imagine? Does Steve Earle play the Southern states? Does he play Mississippi?
I
You know,
that's
does
a
he
good.
play Tennessee? Would he
Well, I mean,
be looking
it's. I mean,
to
he
play
did play.
those
I mean,
states?
he was. He had Texan roots, but he's been in New
Mm.
York in the village. He's just moved on from living in the village, but still in New York. So, I mean, he could. Yeah, he can play anywhere. He's the kind of guy that can just put on a show. He's got that. He's just got the balls to do that, no matter what.
Mm.
And I don't think he's going to be playing to people who are going to start hurling insults at him about his political views. No, I think it's like Billy Bragg. From that point of view, eloquence for discussion, but obviously more like-minded people doing that.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub production.